you rolling? Okay, wonderful. So today's presentation and workshop is on brewing worm tea. And I have one up and running over here. This one I only started this morning at about 8 o'clock this morning. What I've done is I've taken a bag and I've put about a litre and a half worth of very good quality vermicast into that bag, suspended it so that it hangs in the water. And the reason I put it into the bag is that I like to use a spray canister when I use the worm tea itself, so I don't want to clog up my nozzle. But if you're going to use it as a soil drench, then there's actually no real reason to suspend it the way I have, although I do like to put my air bubble directly underneath it and allow the bubbles to get right through and move it right
Is
through.
that just cold water?
If it's warm, much preferably to use warm water.
Okay.
Mostly because your microorganisms tend to work at a slightly higher temperature, far better. Same as in a worm farm, you want the temperatures to be between that 15 and 25 degrees if you can. I actually even put this out here this morning because the sun was on here, just to try and warm it a little. But I add molasses to it, and we may as well set up this one here, and I'll show you how I did it.
Okay. Why do you add molasses to it?
Molasses is used as a sugar source for your microorganisms, and it boosts your quantity of microorganisms tremendously. If they've got something to eat, then they are just going to explode.
I'm going to move to here because it's very dark.
So what I've got here is just an empty bucket with clean fresh water. I just wanted to have a look at the color of this water as it stands now, because it's going to change very quickly. This is just rainwater, and I'm going to now take I've got some warm water, and the reason I've got warm water here is that I want to melt some molasses into it. I didn't bring my tablespoon out, so I'm going to just use something else. Yeah, that'll work. So I'm going to give it approximately a tablespoonful. Should be about enough for 20 liters. I'm just going to melt that in there. You don't have to do it in this particular order. You can put your vermicast in first, but this is where we are. Give it a bit of a stir, let it melt in. You'll see the color of the water has already changed. So when you see worm tea, sometimes you think you're getting really good quality worm tea, and actually what they've done is they've gone and melted some molasses or some dark food coloring into it.
Oh no.
Okay, so those people who are interested in buying worm tea that's in a bottle, please be aware of the two following things. Firstly, as soon as you put a lid on your bottle, your microorganisms will start to die off because there's no more oxygen. Okay, so don't buy bottled worm tea. Get it freshly brewed like this and use it as quick as possible. Okay, so what you're missing from here is a bag full of castings. Now, this is the bag that I use. You can use any particular bank bag. I will not say you have to use certain banks' bags. However, if you don't have any of these lying around, a sock or a stocking is better because of the fine meshing. Allows less particles to go through. I'm just going to go across the worm farm there and just
But this is mainly because you are spraying it on. I mean, I
Yes.
wouldn't spray it on, so
as a
wouldn't
soil,
matter.
as a
Just
soil drench, you can just
throw it
drop
in.
it in
Okay.
straight. But then also your bubbles are not going to move it around as much.
oh, okay.
So I do find that it's below it. Okay, so I opened up the worm farm this morning so that the light would push the worms down. I try and get as few worms in here as possible, just because they're only going to survive for about 3 days before they drown. So you don't.
3 days. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
They'll survive for about 3 days in water without drowning. So let's just say I'm putting a liter in here. I'm not measuring it, but I've got a very clear idea of how much a liter is. So I don't really want to drown my worms, but we're not going to brew it much longer than 48 hours anyway.
Oh, is that how long it brews? 48
well,
hours.
8 hours minimum. 12 hours is the point at which your microorganisms are starting to peak. And they'll reach maximum about 36 to 48 hours, depending on temperatures and the how many castings you actually have in here and how much micro. So that to me is about a liter's worth. Let's go and hang that to start the brewing process. So at this point now, I'm gonna suspend it in.
What's this? About 25 liters?
20 liters.
20.
So I've got a 1 liter to 20 liter ratio here, and I can then take a fish tank bubbler, which I've got over here, which is pushing out air, and I've got an air stone on the end of this, and that can then go in.
Sorry, what is that? An air stone?
It's an air stone.
What does that mean?
It's actually, it's on a fish tank bubbler,
Yeah.
which is one of the ways in which you can oxygenate the water. I'll tell you about the other one now. The air pipe, I'm not going to put it off because it's very hard to get back on again, but it just usually pushes out just a bubble, like blip, 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 blip all the time. But if you did an air stone, if you look on here, you can see you're going to get hundreds.
Okay, coming out.
Hundreds of bubbles coming out, as opposed to just the one pushing out.
So where would you get an air stone?
Well, if you go to a fish,
They will sell.
yeah,
Okay.
if you go to anywhere that sells live fishes, I think it's called an aquarium. I think, I'm not quite sure. But if you
Fish shop.
the fish shop, huh?
Yeah,
Any
pet
pet
shop.
store?
Pet store, there you go. So go to a pet store, get yourself your rubber tubing, which should come with your fish tank bubbler anyway, and then you can pop that in, and instead of getting just a one bubble, have a look here.
That's so cool.
You can see that it's giving off hundreds of bubbles, smaller bubbles. And a way in which to tell whether your worm tea is actually brewed or not is the size of the bubbles when you put them in tend to get about 10 times the size. You can already see the bubbles on this one, which has been going for 4 hours. The bubbles are far bigger, and they get to the point before they break. As your worm tea brews more and more, the bubbles tend to get bigger and bigger to the point where they're about double that size. And to me, then I know that I'm nearing the point of it being.
Is there a scientific reason for that, or
I
is
think it's
something you've observed?
Not really looked into it in any depth, but I would think that your
Interesting observation.
I would think if you're putting it through glue, you'd get one big bubble, you know. So the thicker the medium.
The nutrients. So in a fish tank, if you don't do a water change for a while, then the bubbles stay on top for a while. Because
So
of
the surface
ammonia.
tension doesn't break. So you got more surface tension holding the bubble before it breaks because of nutrient. That makes a lot of sense. I said this is one of the ways of making worm tea. On a large industrial scale, you'd take something like a 100-liter bucket, and you put another bucket slightly below it, so you've got a slightly higher level. And then instead of having a fish tank bubbler, you could use a pump and a spout, and then the water would flow into the one that's below, and it would drop like a tap, like an open tap, and that would push down and create bubbles as well. So you could then pump the water that's coming through back into the other tank and get a continuous flowing cycle. So yes, you don't have to have a fish tank, and if you want to do it on a much bigger scale, then you do it on, into water tanks or into dustbins or something of that nature. So if you wanted to do a few thousand liters for a farm to spray on their farm, you'd have to just upscale, and the easiest way is to do. But you do have to be able to draw air in as well. So quite often just the action of the water flowing would allow oxygen to come through and to fill up inside of it. So we were looking just now at the springtails. have a look at the springtails that have now gathered on the top over there. And those are because they can break the surface area and they float. So for a long period of time, you'll see them there. Also a good sign to show you of how active your vermicast is. I mean, these ones haven't congregated yet, but you only just put it into the water, and they're also starting to, they'll all end up getting together, you end up with a floating 10-cent piece more or less size as they go along, as well as all your pips that might be in there that are actually on the way to be biodegraded, are also going to start getting air inside them and starting to raise. Okay, so we have then worm tea. I suppose I could show you how to use it, because that's probably a good thing to do. Now, we've mentioned that there's two major ways of using it. The one is a spray, the other one is a soil drench. And the spray is I don't purport to have any knowledge of what type of spray can this is or how it works best, but what I do know is that changing the misting will allow it to go shoot further. So if I wanted to let's have a look. I did this during the course of the week, but now I'm doing it again. In the morning, underneath the leaf, you've got the stomata, which open up. The guard cells relax, and the stomata open up, and leaves can absorb nutrient directly into them, which gives you an almost instant boost for your leaves. So I would generally, in the morning time, I would spray underneath.
How often would you do that?
Recommended every 2 weeks. I tend to do it every month or two.
Okay, and it's right throughout the year, not just the growing season? Or...
I would do it throughout the year. I wouldn't just wait.
Yeah, it's not doing any harm anyway.
And no harm at all. If it doesn't get used up here, it'll drip down onto the ground. Yeah. It'll get taken in by the ground, and it'll be given to the roots.
So you do all your plants?
I do everything as I'm going along. This one is now the first real decent harvest of cherry guavas we've had, and I started doing it as of this year. And this tree has never produced this amount of cherry guavas. It's really looking beautiful this year, and I'm very, very happy with the way it is. I don't want to spray onto the leaves when the sun is shining, because that has a tendency to burn your leaves. The magnification through a water drop from the sunlight has a tendency to burn the leaves. So do it in the morning and give it a chance for it to...
and rainy weather, does that matter?
These are now going to be absorbed as I'm doing this. It's literally a situation of if the stomata are open, it'll go straight in. Yeah. And it may be a little bit late in the day already for us to but really work as hard as it could. So that's sort of the idea. I'm not going to do the whole tree, but you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to do the whole tree. And as a soil drench, you literally take it and you pour it directly over where your roots are. The nutrient will be taken down, will filter down, and be absorbed directly and back.
Good amount for the soil drench.
Depending on the size of the plant that you're looking at. If you're looking at a tree of this nature and I want to soil drench the roots, if you see that much in the way of a top, you've got literally the same amount in the way of a root ball down below us, literally as big as the top of what you see in a tree. So you don't want to necessarily do right up against there, you want to go on the drip line. So your drip line is going to be where it comes down at the end of most of the tree, so it'll be in a ring around the tree, literally the size of the outside of the top of your tree and slightly in. So you don't need to go beyond that point, you want to go from that point in, and you also don't really need to go as close as the actual thing itself. So probably a meter's space in a ring around the bottom of this tree if I can get to it. Yeah. But I have continuous leach coming from these farms now. Yeah. But my soil has changed dramatically in the last couple of years. I started to foresee settlers that haven't been. This is still oily, fine sand. It hasn't yet been worked. But as soon as you start looking into my garden, with every time that I pick up a handful and I just throw it down into my garden, my soil has been building. Its ability to hold moisture has changed. Its ability to hold and make flourishing life come from it has just been through vermicast.
So the benefits of watering with worm tea as opposed to mixing vermicast in around, that's the same thing, different benefits, vermicast?
The only difference really between worm tea and castings is that you're now boosting your microorganism content. And
By
your
using worm
microorganism-
tea?
By using castings
Yeah.
and making worm tea.
Yeah.
You're boosting your microorganism content, and the microorganisms have got a symbiotic relationship with the root systems,
Yeah.
whereby they take sugars
Yeah.
and they give nutrients,
Yeah.
and they actually change their form. Microorganism can break. It's free living inside the soil, but it actually can be absorbed into the root itself. And it changes its form from being a free-living microorganism into something that I don't know the scientific name for it, but I know it just changes. It sort of opens up, gets absorbed into the tip of the root, and comes back out again quite near the front of the root again, probably a millimeter or 3 from the tip of the root. At that stage, all its nutrient is gone. It then closes itself back up again and carries on going as a microorganism. And then it's empty of nutrients. It'll start absorbing again. It'll start eating again straight away and taking in nutrients. So that's quite a fun fact.
So it's not it's better, or does it matter to do tea?
It's different. This is far more of a slow release. This is
slow
almost
release.
an instantaneous answer,
Okay.
particularly when you're going to spray it.
Yeah.
As a soil drench,
Yeah.
the nutrients will be absorbed really fast because they're now readily available
Yeah.
for the plant to absorb.
Yeah.
Whereas as a casting, it's a slightly slower process. So you might feed your plants once a month
Yeah.
with castings,
Yeah.
but you can do this every week.
Yes.
And you could spray every day if you really wanted to. So it's almost as if within 2 or 3 days, if you've got a plant that's a little bit ill or off color, you spray it every day for 3-4 days, you should see a huge difference within that very, very short space of time, because the nutrient is right already on the leaf.
And I mean, there's been a lot of different theories about using leachate directly on plants. What's your feeling about that?
My feeling is
Because people sell it, they're like, this came out and like, oh, yeah, bottles of it, have it.
it depends on how it's made.
I think it's just dropped out of the box.
If you had a box that had a tap that was right on the very bottom,
Yeah.
so no liquid could just sit continuously inside it. As soon as you got a base of liquid, you've got no oxygen inside that liquid.
Yeah.
And it's going to change from being aerobic to being anaerobic quite quickly, within 2-3 days. Usually you can start to smell that it's starting to change. It's going, what we like to say in South Africa, froth. Okay? And at that point, your anaerobic bacteria start to outweigh your aerobic bacteria. You need anaerobic bacteria, you have to have it, because they break down things that the aerobics just won't do. But it's not necessarily hugely beneficial for your plants. I've had other strains of thought, people that say, nonsense, use it, it's fine. But if you've had it sitting inside a farm for a week or 2, you will smell that it's just not good for you. So it depends on how it's made. If you've got a free-flowing system and you poured a liter of really good liquid over the top of your castings, and it drains through and out and it came out the bottom end, that I would say would be good. It's putting all the nutrient out. If your farm, however, was full of rotten fruit and vegetables, what it's going to draw out is juice of rotting fruit and vegetables, and you're back to creating a weed killer, really. If you want to kill weeds, you use the weeds and you make them into the weed killer that it's going to use to kill the weeds. And that you're doing an anaerobic. So if you're just filtering out what's coming out the bottom, here's an open worm farm, for example. This came through, I emptied this yesterday. That could be diluted. It's an open top. We've had rain. The rain has come straight through and filled this up. So this has not been standing. it might be better to put a little bit of molasses in and put an air bubble in this thing for a little while just to make sure that I'm boosting the microorganisms that we want, the beneficials. Because they will then push the anaerobic bacteria and microorganisms out, and they will take over the whole situation. That's why in a good root system, you're sitting with your root ball full with aerobic microorganisms, and all the anaerobics can't get in. They're sort of around the edge. They can't really get to it, and that's where the relationship holds for having really good soil and having really good microorganisms around your roots, because they create that symbiotic, which we spoke about, relationship, and they do the interchange where the anaerobic bacteria will come in and rather destroy. The anaerobic will create a relationship with it.
So would you dump that?
Not that.
I know, I'm saying if you just weren't sure what the effort was.
If you opened up, I would
throw it
I
on a
would be
compost
tempted-
heap, no?
Yes, definitely, because it'll activate.
Throw it on a compost heap. Okay.
And because there's enough air inside there, it would probably turn back to aerobics
Okay.
very soon.
I just hate the thought of dumping it. You know?
I would probably throw it onto my. I mean, I do. If I'm ever sitting with leachate that I don't know what to do with, I throw it on my grass, and I throw it onto my my flowering shrubs.
Okay.
I usually dilute it at least 1 to 5, sometimes 1 to 100 even.
Yeah.
If I want to spray it out.
That's what I've been doing. I've been diluting it and putting it on the flower beds as opposed to the vegetable beds. And then I thought, shit, I don't even know if I'm supposed to be doing that, you know?
If it doesn't smell, it's usually fine.
Yeah.
But that's sort of my guideline.
Yeah.
And if it feels like slimy, then again, I don't really like that.
Yeah.
So I go with what I feel is right for what my plant. If I was a plant, what would I like to eat? You know, what would I like for breakfast? And I'd like to have oxygenated microorganisms and not old food from the day before. You know, so that's my choice. If I have a choice between the two, I will always brew fresh worm tea and use it almost immediately after having brewed it. So brew for 8 hours to 48 hours.
And then use it.
And then use it. Because at that point, its microorganism content is high. It's
Yeah.
very, very, very high. As high as it's going to get. At 48 hours, maybe you can go to 72, but at that point, you're going to start drowning your worms.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't ever say to anybody, go as far as 3 days.
Yeah.
At 2 days, your worms are already starting to
Because
drown.
then you take that bag and you put it back in there?
Well, no, you just throw it in my compost.
Oh.
Whatever's left from inside there.
With the worms
But there's
and
no
others.
real reason why it couldn't go back and be used again. But
Yeah.
most of the nutrients have now been dissolved
Okay.
into the water.
Okay.
So whatever nutrient there is inside here will come out and end up in the water. So the idea is that, and you can see the color change. I mean, I've done nothing different between these two. This farm is 3 hours old. That one is half an hour, 20 minutes old. And you can sort of see the change in the color, but not a lot. But if you ask me, I think this is definitely lighter than this one. This one is a darker color, and there's no difference in what's inside it, except that this has been going for a couple of hours. And these over here, which I do, these were going. Well, this is a clear bottle, so it'll be even brighter. But you can see the nutrient in suspension. You can actually see it inside this bottom here.
Hold it to the light. Hold it to the
Hold it.
up.
Up. But you can just bring it down.
I can't, there's no light here.
No, come from the side. Look from the side. Come around the side. You can see.
Yeah, it's dark. Look at this.
No, well then you've got to touch the actual bottle. Okay, don't worry. That's fine. That's fine. I'll just edit that out. Well, so there is your worm tea presentation. I have a bottle for both of you over here. I also have for you, keep back. I also have for you a how to brew worm tea handout. And that is the end of our presentation for today. So, thank you. If you have any more
Thank you.
questions, feel free to subscribe and like and send
Yeah,
notifications and
absolutely.
let me know how things went for you when you actually used it. And thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us. It's great stuff. When's the next one? That's all I need to ask.